Hello and welcome to our weekly show of The Dance of the Soul. And this is Regan Forston, and he does wonderful, wonderful work. He's a very gifted human being who has walked many lifetimes, and I'll let him introduce himself here in a minute. And I am Natasha Venter, who is a psychic medium, personal awareness life coach. And, it really hit me where I do a lot of work. I do feng shui, I do a lot of different energy work, I do house clearings and stuff. And people always go, how can you focus on one thing and focus on another thing? And I go, well, it hit me this morning. I was born into a multitasking family. Like my dad was a chiropractor. He could have been an electrician. He could have been a mechanic. He could have been this and he could have been that. But yet I learned how to, multitask in knowings. And so here I am. And I love to do dimensional healing work. So if you're ever looking for some of that, or anything, how personal counseling about grief and that kind of thing, I'm here. But today we're going to talk about what is it? Personal defects, or and I just lost it. I'm sorry. It's been a very dyslexic day for me.
Our character defects or whatever.
Character defects, those personal defects of ourselves, the character defects. And what was funny is that on the thing on YouTube and Facebook that I spelled defects wrong. And I thought it was perfect for a character defects, because that's mine, is a character defects. I'm very dyslexic, and so I didn't even realize it until I was looking at it yesterday going, ding, but here I don't get hard on myself. It's like, it's part of the show, it's that personality. And that's why I don't hold any judgments. Why should I hold judgments when I'm one that makes those crazy little, I call them flubbles. They're not mistakes, but flubbles. So this is Regan Forston, my partner in lovingness of this show, being better than it's not. So.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing it a couple years now.
Yes.
Well, yeah, what we do, well, my name's Regan Forston. You can see my website there, visit theafterlife.com. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, but certified by the Newton Institute. That's where I do most of my work. But I'd even take my regular hypnotherapy with kind of a bent on doing it in a spiritual way, because it seems like when people that come to me, no matter what their belief system is, if they do have a belief system, that regular therapy even is much more attainable. Like healing is much more attainable, because you realize that you aren't alone. It's like a 12-step program in a way, and you realize that there is a higher power out there. It makes all the difference in the world in helping people to get better more quickly. But with the Newton Institute, what I'm trained to do is to be, in other words, Natasha connects with the other side by just being, okay? Most of us don't have her ability, but in a deep state of trance, which most people can reach, you can be a little bit like Natasha is, where you have access, like the wall comes open and you have access to the other side. We helped about 70,000 people through this process, that they go really deep into trance, and then right at a certain point, their awareness expands to the afterlife. So they can talk to relatives that have passed on. They can ask questions from benevolent life coaches over there about their life, and some get some insight into what's going on in their life. Find out what their mission and purpose is. All kinds of things that we've learned over the last 40 years. So anyway, today we wanted to talk about character defects. And both of us being therapists, Natasha, the way she life coaches and does therapy, and the way I do it, the first thing you realize when you're a therapist, after about being in it a year, you realize there isn't anybody out there walking around that doesn't have some sort of defect.
And what is truly a defect? It's somebody else's judgment on you. And that's not where we're at. It's like, why should we be able to have something called a defect?
Yeah. I mean,
we're human. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, Veronica. Yeah, that word defect has kind of a negative connotation, and we all understand why, because it's, that's just the way us humans look at things. But if you look at it from a higher viewpoint, our defects are just character flaws, things like that. They're things that we have, um, uh, that we have to work on in this life. You know, in other words, we didn't come down. Most of the people, when I have people on the other side and they find out why they were born, they generally were born because they have an agenda of things that they want to learn. You know, in other
Mm-hmm.
words, I don't want to call them defects of soul, but just things they haven't learned yet, lessons they haven't learned. So they come down in the physical body and they have a lot of roadblocks that they planned for themselves to have to go through. Um, and then you come down here, you forget that that's what you planned because you get into this, the wall of forgetfulness goes up. And so
Mm-hmm.
we bitch and moan all the time, like, well, you know, why me, why me, why me? And but when people find out that they chose, for the most part, they chose the difficulties they're going to go through, they kind of stop, kind of bitching about it and say, oh, I guess I better get to work, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Well, I'm going to say though that, there is some of that fine line with, we chose certain things, it's like, um, I'm just going to use the example, let's say, of me when a neighbor touched me inappropriately, and he did do some, it was pretty intense. And, you know, did I choose to have that experience? Well, there was a part of me that chose to have um, some personal things. Like, am I gonna choose to be um, judgmental towards every man that comes towards me, or anything that is negative that way? And so, looking at the bigger picture, it's not necessarily that I chose to be touched in a wrong way, but I did have a choice to overcome scenarios in my life so that I can be my truer self.
Yeah.
And so when you say, did you choose to have be touched inappropriately? No, because the kid that did this to me, he had his problems. The humanness of him had this problem. Now, what he had to learn in this lifetime, I don't know. I All I know is that this moment is the time that we got together. I don't remember him any other way. But there's that story. Is I don't know what his story was that he had to learn in this lifetime. If I was part of that journey of, his brother walking in and seeing us. So now it was outed that he did something like this to someone if his brother spoke up. And so maybe he had to learn something. And so with that, our journey isn't always scenarioed, into, this or that. And that's where the character defects, we have to be careful how we label them in a way, because many a times, it's like, was the kid that touched me inappropriately, did he have a character defect? Well, he had a scenario that was not right, in a way of, he shouldn't have touched a younger, he was a teenager, he shouldn't have touched a 5-year-old in that way, right? But I wouldn't call that a defect, because then that's calling him, like he had something misplaced, and maybe he did, but that's not for me to say. So with that's where we're being careful of the defect. But we can't necessarily say that I chose to be touched inappropriately, but I chose to overcome the obstacles in my life to become my truer self.
Yeah.
And so if you want to take that scenario, being a little different, if that makes any sense, that, we're not here to be punished or make these choices, but there's certain things that help us overcome or learn these lessons to be our true self, or do those things. Because I know for me, part of it was I had to become my truer light in this lifetime. This was my lifetime to be my truer light.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know. I have trouble sometimes, especially with what we look at as innocence, like young children or something, when they have some awful things that happen to them, when they're in this life, totally innocent at the time, and they have bad things happen. And, um, it seems, I don't know, callous sometimes if you just say, oh, they just had it, in a sense, had it coming, like from a past life or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But all I know is that there's more to the scenario than just
Yes.
that thing that happened to him. And if we could see the whole scenario, we would more likely than not go, wow, okay, makes sense now. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned one time on the show where a man took his 3-year-old daughter to the hospital that she had a bad cold, and the nurse there gave her the wrong medication and killed her, just for a simple hospital visit when, it was just a mistake the nurse made.
Yeah.
And the man, of course, there was a lot of lessons in this. I mean, he was so angry, he fantasized about killing the nurse and even
Mm-hmm.
thought about maybe he would because it took his daughter. And then he was lucky in the dream state. His daughter came to him and told him that, Dad, I'm okay. I'm over here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay. What you didn't realize is I had a life's contract just to come down for a short time, because in a previous life, I had done something to that nurse that caused her to die. And I was just coming down just to kind of balance things out. But in the meantime, there was a lesson you needed to learn about loss and how to deal with the loss of a child. So when
Mm-hmm.
he did that, it didn't make him not miss her, but it took away his wanting to kill the nurse, for one thing. And he also got an idea of the higher perspective and knowing that his daughter's on the other side and she's okay. You know, so it's tough sometimes, and it's easy to say until each of us are in our own downtime, and then that's when we don't want to believe this stuff sometimes, because it's hard to go through some of these things.
Oh, it
Um,
really is. It is hard to go through life and knowing that we are who we are, and and then we get these parents and or older siblings or people that are our elders that have these perfectionisms in them, and then they think that, well, like I'm going to give an example, and my husband kind of has given me permission to talk a little bit about this, but he was an alcoholic for most of my kid's life. And he would get upset sometimes in a moment like Mother's Day, usually, or my birthday, you know, let's go wash the car. And then he would think, you know, that why don't you know how to wash the car? And I had to be a buffer to him and the kids because I said, honey, you didn't teach them.
yeah,
And so his state of mind is that they should have known this. That was a character defect. And yet their character defect wasn't that they were taught. And when you
yeah,
talk about, and it's not any, we're all healed now, we're all done some healing work, and that's why I kind of did some buffering, that it's like I would tell the kids, you don't have any, you shouldn't know how to do this. You weren't taught. So let's go out and learn how to do it, and I would go out and help them learn how to do it because I didn't want, it wasn't that I was calling my husband bad, but I would just, there was these moments where, you know, they knew their dad had problems, how can
yeah,
how can you hide certain things, And so there again was a reason. And I can say that I must have done something more right than wrong, because both my kids don't drink and they don't do drugs. And so they both don't want to be that story. And so there's
yeah,
something that healed in our family during that time. But there again, if people weren't aware of this, then that character defect that would have been put on my kids, and I know I've done some character defects, on them unconsciously, or and we all do as parents, we all do something. And my kid tells me sometimes, Mom, you did this to me, and I'm like going, sorry, kid,
hmm,
I was in survival mode sometimes. I didn't do everything right, but there's those character defects of me at that moment. And I'm trying to be careful of that word because it doesn't hold judgment when I say that.
yeah,
It was a character moment, a character defect moment that I didn't do it well.
yeah,
I didn't do it well.
yeah. Relationships. I'm just thinking of well, because we've had a lot of younger people uh, coming through, staying with us and different things, nieces, nephews, and then you see what they're going through right now. And I had to not be judgmental a few times of them because, they're trying to figure things out right now. And I'm thinking, well, all they got to do is this. Don't they know that? And you go, wait a minute, no one's ever taught him that. You know,
Mm-mm.
I mean, when I got married at 19, I only knew what 19-year-olds knew. I didn't know what a 70-year-old knows. And I, I would say my character defect at the time, it, some people would look at it as a defect, but in reality, I hadn't lived enough life and had experience yet where I needed to know what was wrong with me that I needed to fix in order to be a good dad or to be a good husband and that.
Mm-hmm.
And going through the different things that came up and the roadblocks in the marriage with the issues and problems, for a while, I was just kind of numb to that. It was like, you just fight back because someone's trying to get you to change some of your defects in a way, and you don't think there's anything wrong with you, and you think it's, why are they picking on me? But there gets to be a point where you finally go, oh my gosh, you start to see things from their perspective, and you go, oh man,
Mm-hmm.
why
The
didn't I,
dots and dots add up.
yeah, a few times I had these aha moments, and then I'd look at how I was the week before, and I couldn't realize how dumb I felt. Like, how come I didn't know that? That's so obvious once it's pointed out to me that this is the way you should behave. One of them
Mm-hmm.
was when in my second marriage, to this wonderful woman who I still love. She had us, we got together, we loved each other, but we had some issues. So we went to a therapist, and he just had to pound on me for a few weeks there to say, wait a minute, Regan, all the things you've learned in that doesn't mean that that's the way she should look at things. I mean, it was simple things like how we're going to do Christmas. Well, I had a thing I grew up with. This is the way Christmas was, when you open the presents, when you do
Mm-hmm.
things and everything like this. And hers was totally different, you know, and I couldn't let go of that for a while. And then finally, when like a brick wall came down, I went, well, that's stupid. I mean, just find out what her things are, talk about it, and work on a compromise. Or, if it's no big deal, just do it the way she does.
Mm-hmm.
But I had it's just because some of those things were kind of set in stone with me, because that's the way they'd always been. So the big lesson for me a lot of times was that helped me to progress and to start looking at things is always try to really see the other person's perspective as well as your own. Try to, in other words, put yourself in their head, in their shoes. And a lot of times when you do that and you go, wow, the way they're doing things makes perfect sense too. you know it's just I don't know, it's just our minds. you know um with the elections coming tomorrow, wow, we're going to be talking, maybe next week we'll be talking about whatever happened in the elections, with human nature, because it's the craziest thing I can remember since whenever, since I can remember, about elections and things. So people are going to be
And that,
bringing
yeah. Go ahead.
all
I'm
their
sorry.
dysfunctions. All their dysfunctions are coming out. All of their character defects are coming out now in the way they want to vote. When they're voting for me versus them, or what's right for me and not what's right for the whole. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Exactly. Or the commercials are, well, they did da 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 and they didn't do da da da. And it's like, you know, I sometimes I just sit back and I go, would you just tell me what you're going to do for us?
right?
Can you
Yeah,
just tell? Because it's like pointing out other people's character defects in a way, and there are things that we do, there are our personalities. Like I had a show one time where I was like saying to, doing the oh, what's the prayer? Uh, God grant me the serenity prayer. God
the
grant me
Serenity
the
Prayer,
serenity.
right?
Yeah. To accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know I can do the difference. And I'm not saying it right, and I'm sorry.
Right.
But
I know what you mean.
it's like the character of us, I'm not gonna call them defects, is who we are. And can we as another human being live with those? And yes, there's things that we do, like my when my husband was drinking, it was hard, but I had a choice to live with it or not, and his anger was his anger. Now, how did I deal with his anger? So we have these characters of ourselves that make it who we are. And like I was the other day, I didn't take my vitamins like I should have, and I just felt like my blood was molasses. I was just I was slow. I couldn't make decisions. It was one of those days where I had a stressful week, and then I knew I was going to be busy the next day. So it was the day to just, everything in me shut down. You know, I just shut down. And my husband was like, so what do we want to do for dinner? And I went, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what I'm hungry for. I was literally numb. I didn't know. And then it came down to that we were going to do some chicken. And I was like, okay, I know one thing. I do not want to argue with a chicken, a whole chicken, to roast it. And so that's what it came down to. So we went out to dinner, and I was like, honey, you're going to drive, because I know if I drove tonight, I could have drove fine, but how I would have drove would have triggered him. And so I labeled it, honey, today's one of those days I'm probably going to trigger you. And that's not my intention. I am just me today, and with him knowing that today was one of my days, I had a different character that was going to trigger his character, it was nice that I could label it for him. So he knew when something was going to trigger him, that
Mm-hmm.
that he was like, oh, wait a minute, she already pre-warned me. Okay, I can't get mad at her for something that she pre-warned me on, in a way, and I took the triggers out of my hands. I gave him the keys to the car. I did these things because I knew that day, if in a normal language, I would have had a lot of character defects, a lot of triggers, a lot of things that would have done things. But yet at the same time, though, understand I don't have character defects. I have days that maybe I have more character. I may have less abilities. Like today was a very dyslexic day for me. I had a hard time reading and writing, and it was funny because we were watching. I have to do some modules for work, and it was on dyslexia, and everybody was looking at me going, boy, you know all this, don't you? And I go, yep, because I didn't read until after high school, and people don't understand. Sometimes it's not that I would read things, but I did not understand what I was reading. I couldn't comprehend because I was in such survival mode. And so with that, the managing that part of it, that people could have said I had lots of character defects. I could have even been claimed stupid because I couldn't read. And actually, I didn't have a lot of friends, and a lot of people thought I was stupid because I was so shy, because I didn't want to be made fun of. But there's those stories of who we are that we put on these labels that are negative, and it saddens me because a lot of times it's called humanality.
Yeah.
It's the humanness of us.
Yeah. So anybody watching out there now or in the future, and you're watching this, just think about, we all pretty much know some of our big dysfunctions we have. A lot of times our character flaws, I don't know, I'm trying to think of even another word, flaw, but in other words, the parts of our character that need to be taken a look at so they can be better,
Mm-hmm.
or that we can do some things that we shouldn't be doing. We know we shouldn't be doing less of. The first thing is to realize that, and I found out from these 70,000 people that went to heaven and back through this Newton Institute process, that what they really want us to do is to concentrate first on, like it says even in the Bible, love thyself.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, realize you do have these defects, but at the same time, you want to love yourself. We love other people, even though we see their defects, and we love them. Everybody that's married, your partner has a few defects, or we would call her a few, and we have a few, but you love each other. You learn to live with it, or you learn to try to, if you care about the other person, you try to not, to try not to harm them in any way, even though we do sometimes inadvertently, and sometimes it's just because of our defects, so
yeah, our defects with quotation marks around them.
yeah, but that's one reason God's big purpose for putting us together with people that we're going to love is so that through that exchange, the other person will help us to see what our defects are. Like they're just holding up a mirror to us, and
mm-hmm.
if you're unevolved, you want to kick and break the mirror. You don't want to see, especially as men, we're taught in society that we need to pretend that we're perfect, even though we're not. We need to put on that thing that, oh, we did, like we're so smart, we have an answer to anything,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then it's somehow, if we don't have the answer to what our wife wants to know or something, we feel less than, in a way. A lot of men do, and then that causes them to feel angry, and they have all kinds of issues because their spouse is seeing them as somebody that that we think is seeing us as weak or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it's just like when men are, that's the thing I learned in this anger management that I went to for 3 years, that turned my life around, was, realizing that, we don't have the answer to everything, that, we're not perfect, uh, and realizing it's okay to have feelings and to show emotion, which a lot of males still feel that that's weak if you feel emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and you
And I
realize
see,
it.
and I see a lot of people. Sorry for interrupting here, but this is a good segue right here.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of men I'm seeing, especially when they get after like the 50s,
Hmm.
they really start punishing themselves. And that's when alcoholism and a lot of those things come in, is that inadequacy feeling.
Yeah. You know, so, but just knowing that you should love yourself and then actually loving yourself, because people go, well, how do I, how do I go about loving myself? And I would say, just, just write down some things, some nice things about yourself, some things that you do. Or what I think helped me the most is I started doing little random acts of kindness, you know, and, what happens is it changes your subconscious when all of a sudden you start to be selfless instead of selfish,
Mm-hmm.
you know and everybody could, I mean, just start, like everybody, if you want to start feeling better about yourself, start doing things that are, um, loving to the world. Pick up, you're going to a grocery store, and, there's a piece of trash on the ground that someone left there. you know Reach over, pick it up, put it in there. It's funny just how good that'll start making you feel. You go, wow, I just picked up someone else's shit that was on the ground, and I did it, and wow. Um, and it's a way of kind of retraining your subconscious. The other way, like, that's the greatest thing about EFT, is in that tapping. When they're going,
Mm-hmm.
even though I hate my boss right now and I feel like punching him, I love and accept myself. Even though I'm not a perfect human being, even though I have flaws and things that I don't love about myself, it's okay. I can begin to love myself. I think maybe next week I'm going to learn to love myself, but I'm going to do my best. I'm not that bad a person, even though I do these horrible things sometimes. It's like
Mm-hmm.
talking about your issues, and then stopping as you're doing the tapping to say, you know what, even though you screw up a lot of times, I love you. I love you, man.
Yeah, because a screw up is self-perceived,
Yeah.
or it's perceived by others. And really, what is a screw up? Um, an example would be is that you ask, three people, what did you have for dinner the other night? And one would say, I love top ramen. Another one would say, I can't stand anything else besides meat and potatoes. And it has to be meat potatoes. And then you get somebody who's like a foodie who says, it has to be looking exactly like this. And top ramen would be like not even on the radar, but it's all self-perception.
Yeah.
And those are those things that, when we call somebody it's character defects, you know, we got to look at ourselves, because a lot of times when there is a character defect, I'm going to call it with quotation marks around it, that, that's when we got to look at those shadow work. That's when we got to look at
Yeah.
ourselves and say, like, for you saying that you went to anger management for 3 years, that you
Yeah.
had a characteristicness to yourself. I wouldn't call it a defect, that you had anger. And
Yeah,
you were very jumpy and you were very agitated about certain things. And that was a scenario that you had to do some shadow work with. You had to go in and find out how can you heal that part of you that was so uptight and anger,
yeah. This is what's good about therapy for you too, is that a lot of times some of our defects and everything are caused by things that happened to us when we were, young,
Mm-hmm.
teenagers, adolescents, young, when we were just young kids, and things happened that kind of formed our character. And we're kind of, a lot of times we're looking at the world through the eyes of a 5-year-old or 7-year-old, because that's something that happened. And what I tell people when they come to therapy, I said, well, what we're going to do right now, we're going to just upgrade your software. We're going to have you start looking at things as you age you are now as a
Mm-hmm.
50-year-old. So we revisit those things, that those tough things they had earlier in their life. Same with something happened to a teenager and they went and robbed a store or something. Now they're feeling guilty and everything about it. It says, well, now they're 50 years old, and we said, now let's look back. Let's look back and see that dysfunctional teenager and the bad choices that he made. And when you look at it from a more adult perspective, or more mature perspective, you can forgive yourself for a lot of the stuff that you did when you
Mm-hmm.
were younger, because you realize it was just part of growing up, you know, in that way. And I just want to look at situations different. Now, you were mentioning about the boy next door. Well, I had the reverse of that, where I had a young client. I was hoping he was going to be on the show today, but he didn't make it again. Uh, but he was, at least he believed he had something happen by an older girl when he was just, it was his sister's friend or something, when he was like 5 or 6 or 7 or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And it was like a preteen kind of girl. And because of the way the world looks at molestation, looks all that kind of stuff, it was really bothering him. But then now that he's an adult and he looked back and he goes, well, here's this teenage girl that's just coming into her sexuality, then you know how mixed up that can be for kids at that age. And it wasn't like she probably didn't have any malicious intent for him. It was just her not knowing how to express her sexuality as a young teen. And nothing bad happened to him. He wasn't hurt or anything. It was just touching and things like that. But when he looked as an adult, he started to have some empathy for that young girl, that she was
Mm-hmm.
just trying to figure things out, that it wasn't like a stranger off the street took him and kidnapped him and did all that. But just him looking at it like 30-year-old, rather than he'd still be looking at it like a 6 or 7-year-old, like, oh, and he went, wow. And he just changed his perception of that, and his issues with that just kind of disappeared. Wasn't really worried about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the good news is too, people can change. In other words, people think, oh, can't teach an old dog new trick. Well, I'm an old dog right now, and I'm still I'm still learning new tricks. you know
Exactly. Well, it's like my husband who started drinking when he was 12, 14 years old,
yeah.
and smoking, pot and stuff like that. And so there was a part of him that really didn't, and he stopped drinking in, late 40s. Yeah, late 40s, because he's now 10 years sober, and he's 55. So 45, 41, 44, 45. And so with that, there was a lot of years of doing things, and we don't necessarily learn things all at the same time. That we all learn things at different times and ways, and it's
Yeah.
amazing how we hold on to things. Well, like me being touched inappropriately when I was younger, I didn't remember it, except for every time that I had somebody on top of me, I felt this black cloud around me. And I
Yeah.
could not understand it. And then I talked to somebody who was a family counselor, because there was other things that I was working through. And my dad went to him too. And he says, it sounds like you were molested, just because of labeling certain feelings I was having.
Hmm.
And so with that sometimes we don't know why we have certain scenarios. Like for me, I couldn't handle guys, in my face. And then I asked my dad, and luckily he was still alive at that time. And he says, yeah, for a week you couldn't pee. You had to pee through a straw. So with and my mom didn't even remember, which doesn't surprise me, because my mom, when she gets into stressful moments, she detaches. You
Yeah.
know, it was just her makeup. She didn't handle anxiety very well. And so she just detached. And so when things would happen, she'd go into another place. Not to say that she had mental illness. It was one of her coping skills. And there again, could have been a character defect, but it wasn't. And I understand it as a coping skill. And so with you know, going forward in that dance, I had to learn that the defect of me not liking having people, guys in my face, that because of that black cloud. And luckily I married the man who was able to help me work through it, even though he wasn't always the best at it. But he was able to give me grace sometimes when I was like, not here.
Yeah.
I need you over here or over there, type of thing. And so with that going forward with our own personal self, like I could have felt myself as a personal defect because I just didn't want to be embraced by guys. I didn't, or anybody really. I mean, I love hugs. Anybody who knows me, they know I love hugs. I'm a huggable person, but yet at the same time, at that time when I was younger, learning this
Yeah.
aspect of myself, I didn't, because it was like finally I was owning up to something that I didn't remember. I just knew I had these emotions around it, that were popping up. And so there again is the gentleman, something could have happened, but then now I do understand that now that I've worked through it, I forgave a long time ago. It was just one of my scenarios in my life that I had to overcome. It wasn't about what he did to me. It was my own scenario that I had to overcome so that I can be my truer self.
Yeah. So as far as, I think the first thing in changing that you have to do, or the thing that's best to do, is that you have this awareness that you do have this defect, or you call it, and being honest with you, not trying to sweep it under the rug, pretend you don't have it, and just being really honest with yourself and going, whoa, I've my anger is so bad. Look how it's affecting my family. Or, oh my gosh, I yelled at because I had a bad day at work and I came home and I yelled at my little daughter when she wanted to talk to me, and I hurt her feeling, and you go, wow, do I really want to be? Is that who I want to be? You know, and then just trying to check on the internet and say, help for this, help for that. Counseling. The counseling is actually, I think, is really turned around when it did from 20, 30 years ago, where it used to be a shameful thing.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it's been nice because there's been some well-known people that have been even doing commercials recently on TV about they're doing counseling, here, call this number and they'll do some Zoom counseling for you, and it's like, we're starting to realize that, sometimes it takes, it takes some effort, but the fact is that people are going to therapists and actually turning themselves around, because sometimes all you need is you just kind of need a safe person that you can tell your secrets to, someone who you feel is not going to judge you, and that's what you and I do, we do that way. And I love that. I mean, people will tell me stuff and I'll go, okay, I heard that about 100 times. So what's the big deal? And they go,
Yeah.
really? And I go, yeah, come on,
But that's the thing is that going into understanding that a lot of our perceived character defects are triggers for us to say, maybe I need to look a little closer at that. Like right now I'm doing a book study, and it's called, it's off of a book, overcoming under earnings. And I'm almost done with the book because I'm leading a book study on it. And I'm going to go back and do the homework with it as I go through with other people. But it was interesting how, like she was saying, that unless you want to work through your character defects, you have to be willing to go into the darkness. You have to be willing to go into the fear. You have to be willing to go into the knowings of things. And I totally agree with that. I would say that I've done counseling for people. I've done sessions with people, and they'll come around and say, you didn't do anything for me. And I go, did you do anything for yourself?
Yeah.
You have to be willing to sit down and say, yeah, now I'm not going to fix that overnight. And I'm not going to be able to negotiate this all the way. But I can tell you that I can do better than I have been doing.
Yeah.
Like for me, I could be a night person. I can stay up till 1 o'clock easily every night. And I know, Regan, you are too.
Yeah.
And for my husband, who, like the other night, it would have been better. Like I said to him, I'm going to come to bed at 9 o'clock, because he went to bed at 8 o'clock. I can't go to bed at 8 o'clock. I said, well, I'm going to try to go to bed around 9 o'clock. Well, it was 9:30, 10:30, 11, somewhere in there, 10:30, 11. And he came down a little frustrated me because I didn't go to bed at 9 o'clock, like I said. Well, he kind of got frustrated with me because he would consider that a character defect, that at nighttime, I don't always follow through with what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But I'm working on it.
Me
And
too.
I'm saying that 5 nights out of the week, I follow through with what I'm going to say. There might be 2 days that I need that emotional freedom. I need me to be me. And I try to choose those nights where I'm safe, I'm good. And I try to make sure, because his 5 languages of love, part of it is acts of kindness, or acts of. And so me saying what I'm going to do is part of my acts towards his love. And so I try to make sure that at least 3 of his love languages are at least managed, so that he can feel loved, because of the fact that he's still learning that self-love. Drinking all those years, he did not have an understanding of what love was. He didn't come from a family, sadly, that showed a lot of compassionate love. They showed love, but they didn't show compassionate love. And I came from a very loving family, compassionate, loving family. And so for me, it's easy for me to show love, but he has these avenues that are a little bit tighter than mine are. He can do something for me and it's like, oh, but then at the same time, though, his are a little bit cleaner lined and more perfectionistic, and mine are more gray. So it's all in the story of how do we manage who we're with and what we're doing in our own personal self. Because I can tell you that a lot of us feel like are in relationships where one of us does a lot of the character defect work and the other one doesn't. But I can tell you, personal work, it helps everyone around us. And it really helps us when we do the personal work. It helps us to be able to look in the mirror cleaner. It helps us to be happier with ourselves. And then in the long run, and I can tell you this personally, when my husband decided to get sober, he said to me, "You've showed me that it was worth it. You showed me how to be. You showed me what to do." And that part of that dance of doing that homework for myself, I was able to cope with things differently. So I didn't go into the roller coaster ride of the pits and the ups and the downs. I was able to have a cleaner ride because I was able to do my personal self-proclaimed character defects.
Yeah. Oh, before I forget too, for a client of mine, I was looking into it. When I went to this anger management, it was it's called Man Alive, and they changed their website to, let's see, oh darn it, I forget now. I wrote it down for my client. Anyway, but if you look up Man Alive Sacramento, it'll be there. But they have an online program that they're doing now for people, because they've in Sacramento now, they've been there. They've been doing work for about 40 years now with people, and they're considered to be like the best in the country for people. So if you have some anger issues, they have a really good way of knowing how the mind works, how we decide, and which seems like in a fraction of a second, but there's actually a time when our mind goes through and decides whether we're going to be
Mm-hmm.
violent or not. You know, they don't mix issues. They just call, even if your wife says, I want you to take out the trash, and you pretend you don't hear her, that's a form of violence in a way. It's like putting your needs above making the other person feel like you're more than them or something.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a really good way. So if people look up online, Man Alive Sacramento, and they click on it, and their website is something stop something to violence or something. I forget what it is. Anyway, you'll find it on there. And that's a really good program for people that are, and they have a program for women, which is different than men because women have a different process generally. It's actually, they've discovered it's not a one fits all kind of program, you know. And the one I went to was 52 weeks. And then I stayed for another 52 weeks and another, I think, 40 something weeks. Every Thursday I went because I was determined that I was going to change things. Um, However, I help my clients now with what I learned with anger issues to help them turn their lives around. And because we use these other modalities now through hypnosis, EFT, the Havening touch, and EMDR, um, what took me 3 years to go through, someone could get through probably in 2 or 3 months. I had to do it the old fashioned way, just willpower,
Mm-hmm.
trying to, if I screwed up, and again, the first thing they'll tell you in there is you're not going to change overnight. It just takes a little bit of work every day, just to keep plugging away at it. And it is possible. They used to have this saying that once an abuser, always an abuser. And that was kind of true because if you don't do something about it and change, your mechanism is going to work the same way in every scenario. It's going to act the same way. So you have to reprogram it in a way,
Yeah,
you know.
and that's the thing is that always an abuser? No. An abuser who does not look at himself as an abuser,
Yeah.
yes, it will always be an abuser. So with that you have to, there's that, and that's one thing that people who are being um, under the characteristic defect of an abuser, that we have to remember that unless they're willing to see it, it's not going to stop.
Hmm. Yep.
It's just not going to stop. And sometimes it takes jail, sometimes it takes court, sometimes it takes something that, like for me, my husband didn't realize that he was so bad until he was pulled over by 2 cops and he got videotaped. He saw himself drunk. And when
Yeah.
he saw himself drunk is the time he went, oh,
Yeah. He's
I'm
got to see
that
himself
bad.
how other people see him. Yeah.
I'm that bad.
Well,
Yeah.
because of our defects, I mean, that's why we have such we have an addiction problem in this country because instead of people getting help, they just don't want to they don't want to feel the guilt, the shame. And so, they just try to numb themselves down through a number of probably 20 different ways where you can have different addictions.
Mhm.
And so, once somebody has the guts to just turn around, and I can tell people from the work I did, it was mainly in my early 40s, where I finally got brave enough to just turn around and face that shadow behind me. And that's what I call shadow work. And it was no big deal. It's like you turn around, that the shadow doesn't harm you, doesn't kill you. It's actually, when you turn around and look it right in the face, it's such a good feeling. It's like a positive thing to look at your
Exactly.
defects head on. It's when we try to run from them, you know, like um, this woman kept having this dream. She told her therapist of there was this man chasing her all the time, and she'd run and scream and hide, and it happened go on for months. And there was this entity or something was chasing her, and she thought she was going to be killed or anything. Well, finally, she had, working with her therapist, she had the nerve that as that person was chasing her in her dream, she had the nerve to turn around and face what it was. And it was some entity that says, "You dropped your wallet." I'm trying to, wanted to give her wallet. But it was a spiritual dream, I think, for just saying, you got to, if you turn around and face your fears, there's a reward. You get your wallet
Yep.
back, you get yourself
Exactly.
back again. Yeah. So,
You
you
know,
know,
the perceived monster is perceived bigger than it really is.
Yeah.
The mountains that we climb are only self-perceived mountains. Now, I'm going to say that the 10 years of my husband being, going on with sobriety didn't take work. It did take work. It took him doing a lot of meetings at first.
Oh, yeah.
It took a lot of perception of, like the other night when he was making a statement, and the statement wasn't something that it was kind of a controlling statement, and I looked at him and I made another statement that was not judgmental. It wasn't bias. It was a statement, that you've always wanted me to be a 60s wife, babe, and I'm not one, so I'm sorry I'm not that way. But
Yeah.
I will compromise and not watch that show while you're here. It's just a compromise, just like you don't watch scary movies when I'm at home.
Yeah.
It's called a compromise. And he came back later and said, I'm sorry, because it was like, and it was pretty quick. Sorry. Usually it would take a day or two when he was getting sobriety,
Yeah.
but now he's noticing those moments, and it's like, hallelujah, because when we're willing to do the work, and we were healed. I mean, nothing was an argument. It didn't turn into an argument because he was willing to look and I was willing to look,
Yeah.
because I was doing things to trigger him. Not a defect, but it was a moment, and that's the thing about relationships, that we're going to have these self-perceived defects that other people are going to try to put on us. And we have to look and say, is that core me? And is this, how can I negotiate this to make this smoother with us?
Yeah.
Like you do the oh God, it's the numbers. It's the Enneagram.
Oh, yeah.
The Enneagram. And when I was down there, I really got into it again, and I really looked at it, and I can totally hold space for my husband because of the numbers that he is.
Yeah.
And like you guys were saying, well, it takes a 9, who I am, to be married to the numbers that he is, because
Yeah.
of the fact that there is this story. And now he did not take the test. He did not want to take the test, so it was me taking the test for him.
Yeah.
Being married 30 years, I kind of have an idea how he would
Yeah.
answer
Of what
them.
he would answer things. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was, maybe the numbers were skewed a little bit, but I took it like 3 times and it came up pretty close to always the same number. So I knew that I
Yeah.
was pretty close. But there's,
Well,
again, is that there's those core things of us that aren't defects. They're just how we're made up.
yeah. And for people just looking, we'll probably talk about Enneagram every once in a while. It's a tool that so many therapists are using to quickly get to know the mind of their clients. With the hundreds of years of study and how they fine tune this, it appears that the universe, God, whatever, made 9 distinctive softwares in people, and everybody. It's all the characteristics of human beings integrated in the Enneagram, but
Hmm.
different people, some of the characteristics of life are up here like this. They're the number one thing that they kind of are, and then the other characteristics are lower. So depending on the combinations of that, it's for instance, when we go to Enneagram class, Patty and I went for over a year. They would have a potluck at this teacher's house, and everybody would bring something. There'd be 40 or 50 people from Marin County there, and she would pick, a, 1 through 9. In other words, if you're an Enneagram 1 or an Enneagram 2 up till 9, one's not better than a 9, nine's, but it's just everybody's just different types. And she would have everybody up there in the panel, and she would describe a situation, a life situation. Then she'd say, okay, you that have the software of a 1, how do you look at this situation? And then a 2 and a 3. And I swear it was like you're in a comedy club when that happens. Because people they go, wait a minute, the 3's looking at it like this. That's ridiculous. But that's how their software, that's how they deal with it. So
Yep.
when you know your number, and you can take a free test online. 2 tests you takes about a half an hour, doesn't cost anything, and you can get what your number is and your wing. The second test is a wing. That's your secondary characteristics. And then you look up on the internet. Like for me, I'm a 9 with a 1. And so you go Enneagram. It's Enneagram, Enneagram. And you take that test. And then when you find out what you are and you look on the internet about the characteristics, you'll go, oh my God, that's me. that is totally me, you know,
Yeah.
and they're so different from the other numbers. So, like you were saying, when you know what your partner's is and you know what yours are, you're going to know what both of your strengths are, and you're going to know what both of your weaknesses are. Okay, and then you're going to start. You're going to start with an attitude of more like understanding people and realize, oh, that's why they're acting the way they are. You know, because we all think everybody's just like us and everybody should act exactly like us and think like us. That doesn't work, and it causes so many problems,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
It
that
really
way. But
does. Yeah, you can
yeah,
have 5 kids come from the same family, and each one will be different because we're
yeah,
all made up different. And none of us have character defects. We may have things that we could do better. We may
yeah,
have things that we can negotiate better, but yeah, no, not a character defect.
yeah. There's a lot of churches now, Christian churches actually, that are incorporating this uh, in their counseling and teaching and everything, because if you're say if you're a two, which is caregiver, okay, the caregivers are those people that are always looking to do for others. Like, oh, can I help you? Oh, you might need this. Oh, might this. They're the moms that just totally into their kids 24/7, and they just neglect themselves, but they give, they give, they give, they give. And the downside to that, they build resentments when everybody else isn't treating them the same way. And that's not how everybody is made. Everybody's not twos, you know, everybody isn't that way. And so the each number has its pluses and it has its minuses, which would be, we could call defects or something, but it's things that you're working to correct. It's things that
Mm-hmm.
you're working. For instance, twos have to learn to give just for the joy of giving and not want anything in return, or not expecting to get anything in return. You just do it out of love that way, you know, so you don't build resentments and everything. Sevens, they're the adventurer. They're the people that, you know, there's one hill they climb and you think they'd be happy, and they go, oh, there's another hill, and they go, and another, and another. The adventurers, they're just always out doing and that, and they walk into a room, everybody loves them because they're just so, you know, so energetic about everything. But they have a problem following through, sticking with something, you know. So what they have an issue with is picking something, sticking with it to fruition, you know,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just running on to the next thing. So anyway, that's just a little touch of it there. So if you look at, since we're talking
Okay, but
Enneagram,
there's when you Google Enneagram test, there's about 5 or 10
oh
websites that pop
yeah,
up.
yeah.
And there's a specific one that works better.
Well, the one I like is eclectic energies. I think it's called eclectic energies.
Mm-hmm.
But you could go to a few. You'll pretty much all the tests you come out about the same. But eclectic energies works really, really well, and it's really quick and it's free. You know.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's books.
Yeah.
There's all kinds
Eclectic
of books that say
energies
that.
is a really easy test to do. It does take a little bit of time to answer it truthfully. But you know, the first question, you know, first way you think about it. And I
Yeah.
wanted it real quick here. When you Google what was it? Man
Oh,
uh
man alive.
Man Alive. If you type in Man Alive, it's actually the website, Sacramento. And I saw
Oh,
that there was
okay.
a couple other Man Alive
Yeah.
scenarios. So that there's those
Thank you for
lead-ins.
doing
So
that.
yeah, you're welcome. It's easy to do. So if I look down, sometimes I'm just Googling, you know, what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But the any eclectic. Um,
Eclectic energies.
let me see if I can put it in. So how do you spell it?
Yeah. See, I always have trouble with eclectic. E
E.
C
Oh, ECL.
Eclectic, I think. Eclectic.
Let me.
It comes. It'll come up on the first page there. It always does. At least when I've had people do that in the first two or three things. But even if you find
Yeah,
one
here
of
it
their
is.
sites,
Yeah.
eclectic.
ELCECTIC.
Lectic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eclectic.
And like I said, dyslexic today, so um
Uh-huh.
trying to do my better. Energies Enneagram. Energies.com,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
.com for
So
Enneagrams.
what we're hoping you guys take from our little talk today, I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, is just to realize that we're all imperfect. Um, you know, that's part of our reason for being in a body is to learn to progress, to be more towards perfect, but we probably never actually get to the perfect. So, don't beat yourself up over it. Everybody's got issues they're dealing with. And the thing is that there is help, you know, a good therapist. I mean, Natasha or I are happy to help you. If you go to either of our websites there, we can help you with a lot of it and teach you some things. And when, if you're with us for a little bit and we've taught you all we know, then we'll recommend you, going to another therapist or something. It's just all about getting better. And we constantly have clients that get better and better and better and better. And that's what makes us do this, because we see such great change in people. Um, and I can do that through, well, if you go to visittheafterlife.com, I have videos on there on emotional freedom technique and hypnosis. And soon to be, I'll have up there the Havening touch, which is another thing I'm working on my certification for. And they work amazing with all kinds of different issues that you have, that help you manage them so that their issues don't get to be so extreme,
Mm-hmm.
and to do a lot of healing that way. And then there's the spiritual side where, I can help you to reach a deep state, and you can actually go to the afterlife and back, or expand your awareness to the afterlife and back, and that's totally life-changing experience. So if you go to visittheafterlife.com, watch some of the videos on there. You can get a hold of me, and my phone number's on there, and stuff. Still giving out the free book on there um, of Reincarnation is Real. It's about we've proven reincarnation about 70,000 times now. So it's, we don't have any doubt that that's real, and that that's the way of the world right now. But anyway, there's that book I'm giving away free on there. If you just have to ask for it, and I'll send it to an ebook version of it that way. So Natasha, what about you now that way? I mean, you have people call, you can do it on, we can both do it online or in person if you're, within our range where we are, but most everything done now is done online. So many people want help, and it works. Don't you find out too, like doing a Zoom or a FaceTime or some session, it's just like being there now.
Oh,
People are used to
totally.
that.
Mm-hmm. It
It's really
is.
works really good.
Yeah, the only thing that I find sometimes when I'm talking mediumship and that kind of stuff, that there's an action that the person would like me to go up and hug behind somebody to give them a physical love that they were meaning for some, and I can't do that
Yeah.
over Zoom. But at the same time, I love being able to do that. I do also phone sessions. I
Yeah.
I'm even in my feng shui consulting. I can do I don't do FaceTime, but I'm finding a different way to manage that over
Yeah.
WhatsApp. So, going forward in our life, that there is these stories of things, and I love to help people through that. And you can reach me at angelicclarifications.com. And like I've been told several times, that my intuition gives a different perspective and different management on counseling sessions, so that that can help a little bit if that's what it is. But that's the thing, is when we're working with self-perceived character defects that somebody else put on us, we got to really look at that story of why do we have this? Where's this coming from? Because right now we're going through a big spiritual growth pattern of finding out what is our truth and what was the truth of others, and how are we walking other people's truths, even though they're not even in our bodies. They're not even, well, they're in our heads, but they're not even in our being. It's like, let's say a grandfather that passed away, and yet we're still speaking like them, and having judgments like them, when it's not even our truth. So this is a time to really be aware that it's time to say, I need to be my truer self, more loving if I can.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so
so
just start doing little, just start working on your shadow, or actually to start loving yourself. Just start doing for others. Step it up a little bit. You know, one thing you could do too. You're going into a grocery store or something, and somebody's 100 feet away. Well, just stand there and hold the door for them. and just see the smile that brings on their face when they realize that you went beyond your normal, how long you'd hold the door open for somebody, for them, and all these things just start retraining your subconscious to try to look at every situation and what you can do to put a plus there for the day instead of a negative.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I know, like with me, people who, when they see me today, they don't realize who I was 30, 40 years ago. And I go, I'm not that person anymore. But, started doing the shadow work, started doing retreats, started, reading books on self-improvement and everything. And once you kind of get into it, it's not a drudge. It's a wonderful
Mm-hmm.
thing because of how you change your character and how people perceive you, uh, and it feels good to have, when you walk in a room, to have people smile and to want to hug you, rather than run away from you. you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, we can carry on this conversation for a long time, but
yeah.
hopefully we can keep
Time to
this
go.
more at an hour so that people can go off and do what they need to do. So
Yeah.
with that, you can catch us every Monday at 4 o'clock Pacific time on all uh uh let's see. I'm on we're on Facebook and YouTube and on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, sometimes I don't get comments there, so I apologize. So if you want to go over to my YouTube channel, Natasha Venter Angelic Clarifications. And I also do my show, Angelic Clarification, Life Clarifications with Natasha. Just like I said, I'm very dyslexic today, so my words are not coming out straight. And I'm going to have a special guest on my Wednesday show,
Who?
Marcelle Allen. She is someone who does Dreamosity. She is one that helps people get their business going and talks about money and that kind of thing. And then
Oh,
she's also partners with someone. It's called Laugh Tech. And I actually did a year of classes with them where they help you break free of they get you to where you can be on stage if you want. They give you
oh, wow.
things to work through and fun ways to do it. And how are you perceived? What is it? It's kind of like, if you ever had talked to, have you ever heard of Toastmasters? They're a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
like Toastmasters, but funner.
Oh, I'm a
But
funner.
funner
I like funner.
because laughter is part of their story. So
Yeah.
she's going to be on my show on Wednesday, and so with that
At 4 o'clock, right?
at 4 o'clock Pacific time on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. I will not be on Instagram though at that time. But and if you're one that you do not like watching videos and you're at work and you have a chance to listen to podcasts, all these shows are put on podcast. You go to Life Clarifications with Natasha and you will find us on most podcast platforms.
Life clarifications with Natasha.
Yes.
Is there a way in the future, like when people do that? Because there's all these different names that have that. Is there a way that you can have that when you're doing that at the end? We can put it on the screen where people actually can see that with
Yeah.
yours. That way,
So
what would it look like?
what would it look like?
Yeah.
You would go for in any podcast platform. So if you go on to iTunes or any of those things, you would just life.
You can type in a note and people
Mhm.
see it on the screen. That's pretty cool.
Shans. And people who listen to podcasts, they know how to do this. Natasha.
It's
That's
Natasha.
for podcasts. There you go. For podcasts.
Okay, I don't see it.
Do you see? Are you getting the?
No, was I supposed to see it like I'm looking at you right now? I'm supposed to see it come
So
up.
I
There it
right.
is.
Yep, right
Okay,
there
life clarifications with Natasha.
for
Okay,
podcasts. And
great.
then we also did the oh nope, sorry about that. This is the
Oh yeah,
Mad
Man
Life
Alive
for
supplemental for anger
for
help.
anger help.
Yeah, yeah,
And
great.
then we had the
Oh yeah, eclecticenergies.com for enneagrams to help find. Yeah. All right.
Personality traits, and I hope I spelled traits right. Uh, so with that, it's one of those things that as we go
Yeah.
forward and um, it's amazing when we can go forward and have these helps. So blessings
Yeah.
to
That's
all,
great. Okay.
and we will see you next Monday. And I don't know yet what we're talking about, but I know that it will be a blessing.
I think
So
maybe something about well, we'll see what the fallout is from the elections,
yeah.
and maybe talk about why different people voted the way they have, or any dysfunction that we see there, and how they could approach it spiritually. You
Okay.
know.
Yeah,
All
maybe
right.
we'll
So
talk
something
about
like
that.
that. Okay.
Maybe we will. Maybe we will. Well, blessings to all,
Okay.
and know that you are perfectly imperfect in the eyes of love.
Perfectly
So,
imperfect. Yes.
yes,
We're all in this together.
we are. Bye now.